All right, hey YouTube, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about conditioning, how to not gas out during jiu-jitsu. My name's Jason Kapnick. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I have over 20 years of strength and conditioning experience. And if you're out of breath on the mat, you feel gassed, you feel tired during your rolls, this is the video for you. So before we get into like what you would think of as conditioning, energy systems and heart rate and things like that, there's two things that are, I think, even bigger than that. And the first one is body composition. So if you're just too fat, you're never going to really be able to be well conditioned on the mat. You're always going to feel like you're just carrying too much weight. You're always going to feel like you're behind. And that's okay. That's not a value judgment. That's just order of priorities, right? That you can't be thinking about conditioning if your body composition is not in order. So if you're overweight, if you're carrying too much fat, that's the first place to start. And that's probably a whole nother topic in and of itself. But as just some kind of general guidelines, I would say be strength training, focusing on heavy weights, big compound movements, at least 2 days a week, probably 2 to 3 at most for a jiu-jitsu athlete. Focus on eating a lot of protein and maintaining a mild calorie deficit, 300 to 600 calories per week. And that's really kind of all I need to say on body composition, right? I don't want to get outside the scope of this video, but something to think about for sure. The second thing that I think is huge and is just like probably the majority of people that are going to ask me about like, hey, what can I do to improve my conditioning on the mat? Like the overwhelming majority, it's not a problem of their gas tank. It's a problem of their fuel efficiency. So it's not, another way to put that would be, it doesn't matter how big your gas tank is if you're only getting 4 miles to the gallon. If you're inefficient on the mat, that's like the number one thing that's going to wear you out. And some of that is a skill thing, 100%. Like a big part of that is a skill thing. And as you get better at jiu-jitsu, you're going to be more efficient with your technique. You're going to know when to use energy, when not to use energy. I think most people know that. And most people know that, but I think it's even bigger than you appreciate. If you're a white belt, blue belt, even a purple belt, I just don't think you probably even fully appreciate how much efficiency can benefit you as your gas tank and in the way that you perceive your cardio on the mat. Gordon Ryan recently had something on Instagram or somewhere where he said that conditioning, cardio doesn't matter for jiu-jitsu. And I think that on his level, the way that he rolls, he's just so efficient and fluid. Yeah, I think that's a true statement for him. For a white belt, the cardio is a much different equation because you're so inefficient. So being more efficient with your technique, obviously, is huge. The second part of that is just kind of the way that you're pacing yourself on the mat. So if you're just being a spaz all the time and scrambling like crazy and just, you're just being a spaz, not necessarily just being a spaz, but also maintaining a pace that you just can't keep up, well, you need to learn about your pacing a little bit differently. And, the best way to do that is just never take a round off, whether it's live sparring at the end of class, whether it's open mat, just strive to never take a round off. And that's one of the ways that you're going to learn pacing. And, within that, there gets to be some nuance too. For example, if I need to kind of pace down a little bit and I'm in a standing position with my partner or with an opponent, whatnot, well, maybe I do need to pull guard. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the sport of jiu-jitsu, of course. Or, perhaps I'm tired. I need to pace down. I'm going to look to use pressure passing as opposed to loose passing where there's a lot of movement, side-to-side movement, where I have to be up on my feet. Little things like that. And that's something that really only comes through mat time and experience. But, between those two things, body composition and skill pacing on the mat, that's probably going to cover the majority of people watching this video. I think most people, especially hobbyists, probably don't need to get into lactic, alactic, anaerobic, all these, ideas that come to conditioning and metabolic. It probably doesn't matter. If you can be a good body weight and learn how to pace yourself and use technique, you're probably going to do fine as far as your cardio. Now, If you're looking for a little bit more, you're a competitor, you're someone who's in good fitness, and you want to take it to the next level. Well, let's talk about that too. So the two big themes that we're going to focus on here are kind of that overarch the entire framework that I'm going to give you here. Number one is prioritizing skill. So jujitsu is a game of skill, and technique is your blade. The more that you can improve your technique, improve your efficiency, do the right thing at the right time in the right way, the better you're going to be at jiu-jitsu. And on top of that, of course, the better your conditioning is going to feel on the mat. So if we have a choice between going to the gym versus going to jiu-jitsu and getting a similar cardiovascular stimulus, we definitely want to go to jiu-jitsu. So prioritizing skill, and this will come up in some other ways that we can talk about too. And then the second one is focusing on recovery. Again, we don't want to do so much, whether it's in the gym or on the track or on the treadmill, whatever it is. We don't want to do so much off the mat conditioning that it starts to impact our on the mat performance and our ability to learn skills. So they kind of go hand in hand. But prioritizing recovery is a big part of the way that we need to approach conditioning. One of the things I see a lot of, typically lower belts, typically it's a white and blue belt thing, is they'll have a competition coming up and they're like, oh, I got to get in shape. They go David Goggins on themselves. They're running however many miles multiple times per week, and then they get to jiu-jitsu and they're just beat. They're not able to effectively use their jiu-jitsu skills because they're so tired. And while their like cardiovascular fitness may be improving, like if you measured their their VO2 max, for example, or any kind of metric of cardiovascular physiological fitness, yeah, it's going up, but that guy's not going to do well at the tournament because he's under recovered for jiu-jitsu and he's deprioritized skill. So with that in mind, let's talk about kind of how we need to look at this. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to talk about all of this conditioning in the framework of metabolic systems and the three energy systems that provide energy to your muscles. One of the things I'm not really going to talk a whole lot about is kind of like your heart and lungs and just your ability to pump blood, stroke volume. I think that stuff is like VO2 max even. We don't need to get that technical. And we don't need to think about this as like lung capacity or like heart rate stuff. What we need to think about is energy systems. So there's three basic energy systems, and I'm going to try to strike the right balance here between giving you enough science that this is accurate, but also not overwhelming you. So I know some people are going to be like, oh, that's a gross oversimplification. And then some other people are going to be like, that was too sciencey, but I'm going to try to strike a nice middle balance here. And so basically the three energy systems you have, the first one is the aerobic alactic energy system. And it uses primarily fat and oxygen as fuel. Takes place in the mitochondria of the cell. It's a very clean burning, very available energy system to your body that you can run for hours. The next one is the aerobic lactic energy system, and I'm just going to call that the lactic energy system. It does use oxygen, and that's why it's aerobic, but it also starts to use muscle glycogen for fuel. So those are the carbohydrates that are stored in your muscle, and glycogen is also stored in your liver. So the lactic system uses glycogen to produce energy, and it produces also lactic acid as a byproduct, and that's why we call it the lactic system. And what I think is important about this system is it does provide more energy than the aerobic system. It's kind of an intermediate energy. We're going to really want to deprioritize training the lactic system, and we'll talk about why. But the main thrust of it is that the lactic system, by producing lactic acid, has a tremendous demand on recovery. So that lactic acid creates a burn in your muscle. It breaks down more muscle protein, which causes you to have to recover more. Not only that, there's hormonal implications. You hear about endurance athletes or people who are just doing too much, being overtrained, suppressing testosterone, high cortisol. Lactic overproduction of lactic acid and overuse of the lactic system is going to exacerbate and add to those kind of things. So it's an important energy system for the body. And we'll talk about where it fits in. And then the third one, the last one, is the anaerobic system, the phosphocreatine system. And the anaerobic system produces tremendous short-term energy, great for like very quick, explosive contractions. It does not use oxygen for its energy development. It uses creatine and phosphocreatine, but then that system is replenished through the aerobic system. So these systems work together, and typically they're all going to be kind of to some extent running at the same time, right? That it's not just like the body switches off one and then turns on the other. So the aerobic system's kind of the base. It can, it probably kicks on immediately. It can run forever. The anaerobic system produces 10 to 12 seconds of kind of intense effort, and then it's burned out and then needs rest to replenish. And then the lactic system is kind of in the middle there. The glycolytic system would be another name for the lactic system, because it burns glycogen. And, that's going to happen kind of in the intermediates there. Let's talk about how we train these three different systems, and then we can talk about, a little bit more about them. So aerobic stuff is probably best trained through zone 2 cardio and things that approach that. So that's going to be situations where our heart rate, doesn't exceed a certain threshold. But I think a better way to do is to use the ventilatory threshold. And basically what that means is that once you have to open your mouth to breathe, you've crossed from zone 2 into zone 3. So, you can go for a walk or a jog even and just breathing through your nose. And that's a good way to kind of stay in zone 2. Maybe it's even on the mat rolling, and being able to primarily just breathe naturally through your nose. And so the question is like, well, why not go into zone 3, zone 4, zone 5? Don't those also train, yeah, absolutely. It just starts coming at a higher cost to recovery. So in zone 2, we're getting a lot of the kind of the maximum return on our investment as far as we're developing the aerobic system, and now we're not involving the glycolytic lactic system, or the anaerobic phosphocreatine system. So we're able to just almost isolate in a way the aerobic system. Lactic glycolytic training, that's typically going to be stuff that's 2 to 5 minute in duration, potentially more, and things like 800 meter, 400 meter runs, interval training. The way it's done in most places where it's kind of 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off, 30 seconds, that kind of stuff is going to be at a pace where it's not truly anaerobic. Orange Theory, your Metcon classes, those are all being done at a pace that's too fast to be anaerobic, and those are going to be glycolytic and lactic. And then as far as your phosphocreatine system, your anaerobic system, that is being trained through sprint and high output kind of stuff. The weight training that we do, explosive weight training, that's going to start to get at it, of course. Kettlebell swings, snatches are a great way to get it. Sprinting is a great way to get it. Sprints on the air bike, things like that. So from a programming recommendation, we want to bias the anaerobic and the aerobic alactic system and kind of deprioritize the glycolytic lactic system. And the reason for that is if you just imagine that I have a demand for 100 units of energy, okay? And I'm a little underdeveloped aerobically, and I'm a little underdeveloped anaerobically. I'm going to have to take up a big chunk of that with my lactic acid, my glycolytic system. And that comes at the cost of, again, lactic acid production, cost to recovery, burning of muscles, difficulty, building muscle tissue. Whereas if for that same 100 units of energy, I have a very well-developed aerobic system and a very well-developed anaerobic system, the contribution of energy from that glycolytic system is thus reduced. So I have less lactic acid production. I have less negative hormonal and metabolic cost to my recovery. So that's why we want to bias these forms of exercise. So if we do need to get lactic work in, and jujitsu is already so lactic that we want to use jujitsu for that. So I wouldn't want to see someone go to some kind of Metcon class. I would much rather see someone do really hard live rounds with partners that can maintain a pace. So maybe that is, King of the Hill. Maybe that's, a Junkyard Dog or things like that, Shark Tank, whatever we call it, where you're being pushed to your limit on the mat. So again, we're prioritizing skill development for whatever limited recovery we have as athletes. We're using it to kill two birds with one stone. We're getting skill development work in, we're getting mat time in, as well as getting the lactic glycolytic work done. So yeah, so we want to deprioritize it in our training. We want to be using zone 2 cardio, going for brisk walks, maybe jogging for some people, swimming, and also just getting a lot of our rolls done at a pace where we maybe don't have to start breathing heavily, especially if you're a higher belt. You can definitely do that, roll with a blue belt or purple belt. For me as a teacher, I'm rolling with my students a lot. And, a lot of times I'm rolling with them in a way that I want to, I want to test my game, test things I'm working on, but also get a sense for what they're doing too. And so a lot of times, yeah, I'm able to get, zone 2 cardio from jujitsu, and that's ideal. That's fantastic. Now, when do we want to start getting lactic acid work in? I mentioned that you might want to start getting it. Well, the good thing about the glycolytic system, the lactic system, is that it adapts really quickly. So if we're in a situation where maybe we have a competition 4 to 6 weeks away, that's when we're going to kind of start doing the lactic acid work, the glycolytic work. And so that we have the maximum energy production available to us at the tournament, at the competition, whatever it might be. So what we're going to do is we're going to add on top of our training, or maybe slightly in replacement of some of our anaerobic work, we're going to do more lactic stuff. So if we've been doing kettlebell snatches, if we've been doing something that's maybe 6 on the minute, and that's more anaerobic, phosphocreatine dominant, well, now maybe we'll be doing 12s or 15s on the minute, and we're getting probably even more of a cardiovascular stimulus now, and we're getting that glycolytic stimulus, and that's perfect for kind of 4 to 6 weeks of adaptation. So the time to turn that on is in the 4 to 6 weeks before a tournament. All right, so those are kind of just some ideas to think about when it comes to conditioning. So in summary, the 2 things before you even think about conditioning: number 1 is body composition, number 2 being your skill and pacing on the mat. Those things supersede anything related to energy system development, anything gym, anything strength and conditioning. Get your body composition right and learn to roll in a way that supports your training. Then we talked about the different energy systems, aerobic, glycolytic, and anaerobic. We talked about why we want to bias the aerobic and the anaerobic systems, and how we can kind of taper that into competition. So I hope this gave you some helpful ideas for how to structure your training. As always, if you're looking for more help, just shoot me a message. I do training here in my facility in Boca Raton near Deerfield Beach, kind of West Boca. And I'll also do online training and programming. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me a message, and I look forward to working with you. Until next time, thanks so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe.